Today on Midlife Conversations, I've got my new friend, Dr. Sabrina Solt, who I actually met as soon as I moved to Scottsdale, Arizona. And what got my attention with her is, first of all, she's a mom of three. She's a doctor. She has the most flawless skin I think I've ever seen in my entire life. So I didn't even tell you I was going to ask you about that, Sabrina, but I've got to have to ask you about the skin because she looks like, how do I describe? I would describe you, Sabrina, as you look like you're photoshopped in real life. Your skin is so flawless. It is so flawless. That's not why I had her on the show, though. The reason I had her on the show, I'm going to ask her about skin, but is we were chatting and we were talking about my explant. When I met her, it was upcoming, and she had shared with me that she had done that too. And we started talking about scars, and she showed me hers, and you could like barely see them. They're invisible. Now, me just coming out of surgery, mine are super thick and not pretty right now. And she had told me that there is all kinds of therapy you can do around that with needles, with peptides. There's scar therapy, which got us into a whole conversation about peptides. And when I asked her more and more about her practice, she told me that she loves needles. Now, let me explain. She said that if she had an extension of a needle on her hand, she'd be happy. She happens to be a genius when it comes to needles and helping people fix muscle skeletal problems, help them correct things going on in their skin, helping them reduce appearance of scars, all the things that we in midlife want to know. So thank you so much for being here, Sabrina.
I think that's the best intro I've ever had on a podcast interview. So thank you so much.
Okay, so I'm going to back up a little bit just so people can know a little bit more about you. Like, how did you become a naturopathic doctor? Why did you go that path versus Western medicine? If we could just sort of start with that, where that even came from.
Yeah, I wanted to be a doctor from a very young age. And when I was in college, we actually had someone come in and give a presentation on what naturopathic medicine was. And the summary of it was, well, we get to the root cause of what the person's problems are and heal them there. I was like, well, this makes sense. Like, this sounds like exactly what I want to do. So finished my undergrad degree. You have to have a undergrad degree in order to get into naturopathic medical school. There was only 6 of those at the time when I was entering it. And they were all in kind of like miserable places, except for Arizona. I was like, well, you know what? If I'm going to kill myself in medical school for the next 4 years, I'm going to do it somewhere nice. So I only applied there, got in, and really haven't looked back. I've been in Arizona ever since.
Now, I love what you said that about root cause because I've, as you know, been on my own journey, especially this year, where I would see one medical problem in myself and try to like deal with that and realize there's a root behind that. And then there's a root behind that. And there's a root behind that. And it really opened my eyes to especially all of the midlife women that we think it's like this one thing. It's like, it's my hormones, or it's because I'm aging, it's menopause, or it's my blood sugar, I'm type 2 diabetic now, or it's like, it's this one label. And what is frustrating is most, not all, but most traditional doctors, they just don't go deeper. It's just, it stops right there. And I think it's so important for us to stop letting insurance dictate treatments and to start opening our eyes to more natural approaches and do exactly what you just said is the reason you went to the school, is to get to the root cause.
Yeah, you're so right about that. And it becomes tricky, right? Because these doctors, I'll tell you one thing, nobody goes to medical school because they don't want to help people. You just don't put yourself through that because, right?
Yeah.
So you get these doctors and they're out and their hands are tied by the insurance model and just, who their employer is. And they actually don't necessarily have the freedom to do what they want to do to actually help you. So they're stuck with the 5-minute appointments, the quick prescriptions. And yes, while it's covered by your insurance, that's great. You have to pay out of pocket, but you're actually not getting the care that you need or deserve.
No.
So it sucks.
Yeah, it does. So there's a lot of different ways you could have gone in naturopathic medicine. Like you really could, there's so many things that you could focus on. What led you to this whole idea behind the needle and peptides and these fun things that are really more niche?
So yeah, great question. When I was in school, I had the ability to be on a shift because you have to do your clinical rotations, where I had a patient come in with a shoulder injury and they were trying to prevent surgery. And we got to do a therapy on this patient called prolotherapy, which involves injecting a solution that's mildly irritating to the area to trigger the body to start to heal the area. And over the course of several treatments, we basically saw this guy go from being unable to lift his arm above parallel to full movement, no pain, and no
Wow.
longer having to get surgery. So as a former athlete, I played sports, throughout my life. I've always been into weightlifting, all that stuff. I've done fitness competitions. I had my fair share of injuries myself. And I just kind of fell in love with, wow, we can actually stimulate the body to heal itself, get people back their quality of life, and really do it in a meaningful way. So it just kind of like clicked for me that this
Yeah.
was it. And then I
Mm.
realized I was really good at needles, like really, really
Really
good at
good at it.
handling needles.
I know she told me that I said, what do you mean? Like cosmetic needles? Like I was trying to understand what she meant by that. But that's so then you started going down, I guess, this path of learning more about those things.
Yeah. So start with prolotherapy, and prolotherapy is great because you really have to be technique driven when you're doing that, because part of the art is actually irritating the area appropriately to get that healing cycle to start. After that, I learned about PRP, which stands for platelet-rich plasma, something that we can pull from your own body. So no more difficult than a simple blood draw. And then I started learning all about the other regenerative products. So stuff that you can get from birth tissue, also the stem cells that we can get from your own body, from places like your own bone marrow or your own fat, which does involve a minor liposuction. So people tend to love that combo.
I love that combo. How much liposuction does it require for something like that?
We're not talking about a lot. We're talking like a couple, equivalents of a couple sticks of butter. So nothing
Oh,
really, we're
okay.
not
So
talking about
nothing, we're not
liters.
doing we're not fixing and changing your whole body
Yeah,
here. Just
we'll
little.
leave that to people like Dr. Brown. But yeah, we're taking enough to work within a meaningful way as far as the stem cells go, but we're
Got
definitely not
it.
doing like mommy makeovers.
Okay, got it. Got it. Okay, so how do you decide on something like this, and who is this stuff for? Maybe let's start with the scars because that's like most relevant to me. So, and people have been following this journey here, and then we're gonna kind of expand out. So, people that are dealing with scars like me right now, like I know I need to come in for something. When is the appropriate time to start working on a scar, and what can be expected, and why is this better than doing like traditional therapy? And actually, before you even answer that, what's interesting is I used to buy that gel. It was like Scylla gel or something. And Dr. Brown said to me, he's like, I said, how come you didn't prescribe a gel? And he said, well, we just took silicone implants out of you. Do you want to put silicone on the wound? And I loved that he asked me that. I would have never thought
Yeah.
about that. He wasn't saying don't do it. He's just saying, hey, I'm just bringing this up to your attention.
Yeah, and it's a very logical thing for sure. But yes, there is tons that we can do. And so scars are something that we all end up with at some point. And depending on what the injury was or why you have the scar in the first place, multiple tissue layers can be involved. When we're talking about something like an explant or even a C-section, a hysterectomy, these are the common scars that I see, especially amongst my middle-aged women. We're talking about going through all the layers of skin, plus down into the fat and through the muscle. So with that, when that scar, it readheres back together, you get all those tissues coming together, and now they're kind of locked in place. In a perfect body, in a normal body without scars, all those tissues glide on each other very nicely. Like the fascia glides over the muscle, and you get all this really free movement. When we start binding up those in the scars, you get a lot of restrictions. So people can start getting, I know personally, when my scars from my explant were there, I was getting a lot of restriction in my upper back and neck. Some other women can start getting pain in their hips and the low back when they have the C-section scars or the hysterectomy scars, because you're binding up that fascial plane. Your body can't move as well as it should.
And is that pretty instant, or is that an overtime thing?
It can be over time, but some people notice pretty quickly.
Because when you just brought that up, I actually just messaged my surgeon yesterday. I was telling him my right scar, which is a lot thicker, they did more work there. I have this really bizarre shoulder and arm thing happening. Does that make sense? Is that connected?
100%.
Wow.
Yes,
Okay.
I would bet on that. Yes.
Okay.
Once we get in there, we can really help it out. So there's different things that you can do for scar therapy. You can use just like a basic, like a prolotherapy dextrose-based solution, which will again still irritate it, but again re-stimulate the body to heal it.
Okay.
My personal preference is using platelet-rich plasma or even platelet-poor plasma. Both of those are going to be useful. So it's great to use those because we're actually taking the growth factors that are present in your body.
Okay.
And we put it in the centrifuge. The settings that we use on the centrifuge allow these to actually multiply by tens of thousands or even millions sometimes. So we get a lot to work with. And when we inject, the needling technique is basically what we'll call a hydrodissection. So we're injecting in a way that lifts and separates up the tissues and liberates the scar itself. So you have a plane in between of that fluid, but then that fluid itself is actually going to reheal the area. So A great time to do it. You know, if you've had scars from a long time ago, is always now. We can always remodel the scars. But if you're coming right off of like a surgery, like you are, 6 to 12 weeks is going to be fine, because we want to let your body get through one of its own healing cycles before we start to kind of reignite things.
Got it. Okay. So good. Because I had asked him yesterday, I said, how soon can I start like doing, I called it peptide therapy. I didn't know what it was. He said you can start now, but now based on what you just said, wait 6 to 12 weeks, do it somewhere in the middle
Or
there.
the injections. Now, if we're talking about a topical peptide, which the one that I would recommend, it's called GHKCU. It's referred to as the copper peptide. This stuff is fantastic for any type of wound healing, for scars. You can also use it topically for loose skin and for hair loss.
Oh, wow.
You can get it as a topical foam. It does require a prescription, but it is widely available through a lot of compounding pharmacies, but phenomenal for helping the skin remodel, especially on those scars. So definitely something you could start with now and then see how things progress. It's something you could also continue safely long-term. But then, of course, the actual injections with the scar therapy, especially if you're starting to get the hypertrophic scars that are really like bumpy and lumpy.
That's mine. Yeah, right now. Okay. On that side. What about now when people say just things like put vitamin E on there, just break it open, or just put coconut oil or put castor oil, like what are your thoughts there? Is that waste? Is that doing anything?
It's hard to say, because what you're basically doing with those is you're providing nutrients to the skin. You're not necessarily starting a new healing cycle, so to speak. So it's a matter of, is your body going to use it to do what you want it to do? It's probably neutral. But someone like you who probably wants to see better results sooner, faster, and just get rid of it, especially if it's starting to cause that referral pain, I don't know if I would waste your time telling you to do that.
So it's like, it's not hurting you, but it's not like doing anything. So, okay, everyone that's sending me your oils, let's stop with the oil. I've had all the castor oil, coconut, and to just get vitamin E and break it open. So I've done it all. I did it all. It's doing nothing.
And it's not to say that, that it wouldn't do something or how long it might take, but at the same time, you're relying on stimulating your body at whatever point in the healing cycle that it is right now. And it might not even be receptive to it at that point too. There's a lot of factors that can go into it. Now, castor oil, vitamin E, like those have other uses that people can totally use for. I'm not bashing those at all. I love castor oil packs. Like there's a time and a place for these things. But when it comes to new scars that are already starting to get the lumpies and bumpies, we may need to go a little bit heavier.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask, before I get into peptides, I want to ask about your skin, because seriously, your skin is insane. Has it always looked like that? Are you a freak of nature? What's happening?
I actually had,
if you can see her on video, you see what she like on video. If you're looking at her, you're going to be like, she has a filter. There is zero filter. This girl looks like this in person. Her skin is perfect.
Thank you.
First thing I noticed about you.
It never used to be. Truly, I had acne, like severe acne, through most of my childhood. I remember there was this like traumatic time where, gosh, I must have been in like first or third grade. Like it started really early for me. And I got this like massive pimple that scarred and it flaked off. And it was like the size of a quarter scar on my chin. Gosh. It was a disaster. And it was actually even up until 2 years ago that I was still getting random breakouts. I actually switched my diet. So I'm a naturopathic doctor. I'm just going to put that out there. We were basically raised to worship plants. It was, you have to eat plant-based. You have to eat all the vegetables. Everything should be the plant alternative if possible. And I would double down. Like I was aiming for 10 servings of plants every single day.
I still do that, by the way. I still have like 10. I'll fist
I'm
fight
not
you
saying
over
anybody
it.
needs to, I'm not saying anybody needs to know to do what I'm doing, but if you're asking what I did.
No, I'm very curious.
Absolutely. So I was like, you know what? My skin sucks. I was getting terrible digestive concerns. I had really bad IBS. I would get anxiety. And I was like, you know what? This doubling down on plants doesn't seem to be working. So I switched to the carnivore diet.
Wow.
And I really have not looked back. I haven't eaten any meaningful amounts of vegetables in almost 2 years.
Okay. So let me ask you this. Do you think for you, and I believe it's working for you, but for sure, do you think, and I'm genuinely asking, I'm not trying to lead you down a path of anything. Okay. My thought process is everyone's a little different. So sometimes that's amazing for them. I think there's a lot of variables, like your blood type. There's what else is going on in you. Like for me, I happen to, I need protein for sure. I'm not a vegan, but I do thrive on a lot of vegetables and low glycemic fruits. When I take those out, I want to kill someone. I don't feel like myself. I don't feel good. I don't thrive. My skin doesn't look good. But then I see someone like you and your husband and you're carnivore and you're thriving. Do you really believe that that's ideal for everyone, or do you think it's about finding what's for you? I'm curious about that.
Yes. And the carnivore police might come after me for this, but no, I don't think that carnivore is great for everybody all the time, no matter what.
Okay.
I think that I think that for some people, it can be a great elimination diet to see where you're at, to see what you can heal with taking these things out. I think some people do well with like a seasonal carnivore,
Okay.
eat what's in season, right? So if you're in an area that's really cold in the winter and you don't have access to things like bananas and pineapples, like maybe you just stick to things like that. But yes, I have seen many patients just like you who thrive with including vegetables. Not me. They made me worse. Like if I look at a vegetable, like I know I'm going to get bloated. I know I'm going to get joint pain. Like it's going to be
Wow.
a
So
disaster for
interesting.
me.
Is
But
that an
I'm an O
oxalate
blood
thing?
type.
Do you
It
think
could
it's an
be.
oxalate? Okay.
Could be oxalates, yes. I mean, I used to make like spinach smoothies and spinach pancakes. Like I was all into the vegetables any way I can get them in.
Yeah.
But no, it's like I'm an O blood type. So like you were saying, could blood type be a thing?
Mhm.
They
I
do
am too,
say that
though. I'm all but.
those people do better with mostly
Yeah.
meat in their diet. So could be.
Yep.
I also think that there's other stuff that has to do with it too. Like, what is your gut health like? What kind of upbringing did you have? What
Yes.
are your goals? And right now, this is working for me. Do I know if it's going to be what I do forever? I don't know, but I feel great doing it. And if it's not broken, I'm not going to, try to fix it. And like you said, my skin looks great. I feel the best I've ever felt in my life. I don't have anxiety anymore. I don't have gut issues anymore. My chronic pain's gone. It's been great.
So in addition to the diet, because I get that that's a big part of things for people, what you're eating and what you're consuming, what do you do topically? Do you do anything topical on your skin? And are you a fan of traditional things like retinoids and I can't even pronounce it, hydroquinone or whatever? I don't use any of that anymore. Or do you use more of the natural stuff? Like, what do you do topically there?
So I do PRP facials usually once or twice a year. And that I think helps with just overall collagen production, evening out
Okay.
skin tone, reducing scars, things like that. I used to use the Alatural line. I used them for many years. And then over the summer, I switched to a line called Skin Better. I don't have an affiliation with them. I probably should, because I actually have grown to really like them. I wouldn't say that it is a super quote unquote clean line, but they are all fragrance free, but they're designed to be the type of things that you would use as you want to correct things in your skin, so to speak. Like I said, I've only been using those for the last few months. No affiliation. I'm still waiting to see like what really changes, but so far so good.
What do you feel about like traditional dermatologists when they say everyone should be on retinoids and everyone needs sunscreen? What are your thoughts around those?
I am not a sunscreen fan. I actually don't use sunscreen basically ever. I will remove myself from the sun before I will put sunscreen on. All of our cells on our bodies have photoreceptors for the full spectrum of UV light, so we do get benefit from it.
Okay.
I also don't know if everybody should be on. I don't love the blanket term that everybody should be on something all of the time. I think it depends on what your goals are and what you can tolerate.
Okay. Yeah, for me, I noticed changes in my blood numbers when I was on things like that. So I'm like, I just don't want my liver processing more things like that. So, because we do all of that goes through. So I personally decided not to do the bleaching cream or retinoids, even though dermatologists say they're great. For me, I didn't find that. Do you think with sunblocks, like when they say it's mineral based or it's natural, still a no-go?
I think that if you had to pick the lesser evil, those are going to be the ones to go for,
Okay.
ones that are just less toxic.
Yes.
Funny story though, I actually had a patient who showed up with toxic levels of zinc in their system from a zinc-based sunscreen that they were wearing daily, and they had just started it. Like it was a relatively new addition. So yes, your skin does absorb everything. Let's just like put that out there.
Okay.
And zinc toxicity can be a real issue for some people.
That's wild. That just makes me want to go check my zinc now on my stuff. Do you but also want to be clear, you're not out there baking in the sun either. So you're not saying go get like this super dark tan and be sunbathing either.
I am about safe sun exposure. And like I used to work at a tanning salon when I was in college. Like I
had anorexia. I can relate.
That person. But now I'm safe sun exposure, right? You get the dosage that you could or should be getting without burning, because this is the part that I like. When I worked at the tanning salon, what I would tell people, the burn is a pathological process. A tan is a physiological process. It is just the changing of your melanocytes, right?
Got it.
So we don't want to do anything that's going to be pathological, right? That burn, that's oxidative damage.
Yeah.
happening to your skin, that's of course going to set up issues like DNA damage possibly that could turn
So
into.
when you see that leathery, old, like crinkly,
Yes.
skin, that's a problem. That's from over sun exposure. That's not
Absolutely.
from walking outside for a few minutes without your sunblock on. I want to be
No,
clear
I
with
think
people.
that the average person with safe amounts of sun exposure is probably going to be fine, and you don't need to overdo it on the sun.
Okay.
Now, that being said, there are certain things that can make any amount of sun exposure worse for you. And it has to do really with the integrity of each individual cell membranes. So if a person has a diet high in seed oils or polyunsaturated fatty acids, this can make your lipid bilayer of each of your cells way more sensitive to getting oxidative damage from something like the sun.
Okay. Tell me that in a little bit more basic terms, because I know people are going to ask me, because we keep hearing
They're
seed
like,
oil's
what?
bad, and we know seed oil's bad, but I'm not sure I understand the correlation of, I get that seed oils are bad. But how is this working with the sun to create this problem? That's my first question. And then two, are all seed oils in small doses bad? Like, if I understand like canola oil bad, but like, what if you go to Whole Foods and you happen to buy something that has a little bit of sunflower oil? Like, is that bad? So I guess if you could help with both of those questions.
So I think the dose matters. So the thing we need to really pay attention to with the most basic way that I can put this is, we're at room temperature and our fat is solid. We have saturated fat that we're generally made up of, right? Polyunsaturated fatty acids are always pretty much liquid at room temperature. They are not as stable as our natural fat. When we are consuming these things, they're going to influence how we then rebuild our cells, because those are the fats that are coming in. And if you have providers listening who have done liposuctions, like, you can tell there is a difference in the quality of fat when you pull it out of people, depending on what their diet is like. But so when those fats go into your system and they're making these new cells, they are a little bit less stable than, say, the regular saturated fat that we should be making. And that can make them more easily damaged by something like radiation from the sun, because it increases that oxidative or that inflammation.
Got
process.
it. Okay. Thank you for explaining that, because that has been a source of complete confusion for me and others.
And I think dose does matter, right? Like, if you're just, if you're going out to eat at a restaurant once a month or whatever, and you're having something that may have been cooked in a little bit of, canola oil or whatever, it's probably not going to be the end of you.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to walk outside and instantly fry up. Like,
Exactly.
it's not, it's the net, right? Like, are you making good choices the majority of the time? You're probably going to be fine. I am not one of those people that's like, you need to go super, super strict.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, I'm going to get into some peptide stuff. I don't know that I fully understand the difference. I know at one point I was given BPC 157 in a digestible format, and it was told it would coat my gut health. It gets very confusing with what's a peptide, what should we be taking, what shouldn't we be taking. I'm also concerned about some of these peptides that are about being like growth hormones. I don't know if you even know if I'm saying this right, but I wonder about, like, if somebody doesn't know what's actually going on with their health and they've got some underlying cancer brewing, would that make that worse? Like, how do you know, and how do we use peptides smartly? Because I see people doing really things that I think are a little crazy. Like, they're going to these shady websites and ordering things because they heard it on a podcast. Like, right now, don't do that. So just go online, and they don't know what they're doing with them. And I feel like we can create more problems. So can you give us kind of like a peptide 101, some basic information there?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm so glad that you brought that up right away. So peptides are cool. And I like to call them, they're like the cherry on top of a person who's already doing the things. So somebody who's got a good diet, somebody who's exercising, somebody who's sleeping well, managing their stress, because peptides, they're going to augment a process that's kind of already happening in the system and make it a little bit better. So let's do the example of the growth hormone one, right? Okay. So you can get different peptides that can help your body to produce more growth hormone. And growth hormone is phenomenal. Like, all you have to do is type into Google benefits of growth hormone, and you'll see it's going to make your hair better. You're going to lose fat. You're going to put on muscle. You're going to have, reduced wrinkles. You're going to have more energy. Like, you're good.
Who doesn't want that? Yeah.
Right. It's amazing. And the benefits are totally there. But you're never going to out peptide a diet that is really rich in Coca-Cola and tacos every day. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
You have to have the basics dialed in first, and you can use the peptides to kind of take things to the next level. And that, in my experience, has been the best way to use them. Is we dial in the hormones, we dial in your sleep, we make sure you're eating right for you. Okay. You're getting physical activity. And then we just take you to another level. And it's so fun when we get to do that.
Got it.
The peptide websites that you're talking about, it sucks because the FDA recently, like beginning of November, they took away a lot of the ones that we were currently working with for basically no reason besides just because they're at the FDA, and it was really frustrating. So people are learning about these peptides. They might be hearing podcasts from years ago where some of these things were available, and now the only place to get them are these places, these
These
websites.
shady sites.
And shady is a good word, but it's more like you can't necessarily trust exactly what you're getting and whether it's going to be safe long term, because these websites, they're research only websites. So we can't guarantee necessarily purity, sterility, and there's no recourse should anything happen to you, because they brandish on there not for human use. And you can, if you use it in a human, you could get in pretty deep trouble. So it's something that I personally wouldn't gamble with, but I know a lot of patients do, because, there's certain peptides. There's one that we used to use. It's called cerebrolysin, and it was being used in like places in Europe, like Germany, to actually reverse things like dementia.
Whoa.
And so there's people that, end up in these situations. They hear about things like this and they're like, what do I have to lose at this point? And they really just kind of make that decision for themselves. Like, could I try this? Could I get better? And is it worth could something worse happen? At that point, it's up to the individual. But like legally speaking, as a provider, we can't make recommendations on things that are on those websites. But that said, there's still a lot of cool ones we can use.
So like when you're working with a patient, when do peptides come into the equation? Like after you've done all the other things at the beginning, like when does that, and how do you figure out who would use peptides?
Yeah. So a lot of it comes down to two things. What's their current health state at, and what are their goals? So a lot of times people are coming to me and they want to either get their hormones in place. They want to just, heal their body from various things. And we usually start with, okay, what do we have to dial in to get your physiology to a place where we can then take it to another level? So a lot of the time we have to get hormones under there, right? So guys, especially if they say though, I want to put on a whole bunch of muscle mass, they want to do the growth hormone stuff. I'm like, well, you need your testosterone at adequate levels to support that process in the first place. So let's start there.
Okay. So we go through that first. Okay. Now I want to talk about the big one now, the big peptide, the semaglutide. I remember first hearing about that in the peptide biohacking world. And now it's become this whole thing that everybody in weight loss is talking about, and people are using it to extremes. What can you educate us about that? And do you see that in your practice? And is this like, I feel like naturopaths and biohackers knew about this before the whole world started using it, but you were using it for different reasons. So can you give us a little education on that?
Yeah. So I've actually been prescribing semaglutide for probably about 2 years, something like that. It's been a while. And I have prescribed it differently than what a lot of doctors are doing right now. I feel like they're dosing really high. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot of the side effects from, is it's too high of dosing and in inappropriate populations, where they're just kind of giving it to anybody who's overweight and obese without talking to them about things like, well, what is your diet? How are your hormones? Do you have any other variables coming into play here? And the person that I like to prescribe this for is a patient that I've been working with for a while. We've dialed in their hormones. I know their diet is as good as we could possibly get it. And they still have that weight that is just not coming off despite the best efforts we've had. And when we do prescribe it, it's low doses. It is micro doses, like a tenth or a quarter max of what you might start with at the other doctor, giving us plenty of room to go up while we're monitoring you in the meantime. And when it's done safely, I've seen great benefits in my patients. I've even seen patients who have experienced one of the things that it does is it reduces your appetite, but it does so in a way that it takes away not only the desire to, like, the appetite suppression itself, but it's the desire to consume anything bad. So I've had patients that have actually benefited who have had addiction, things like drug and alcohol addiction, because it takes that away. So they're no longer consuming food for emotional reasons. They're no longer going after drugs and alcohol. It has been life-changing.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Here's my concerns, and maybe I'm completely off base here. So correct me if I am. My understanding is that one of the reasons it makes you less hungry is it slows your gastric emptying. And it also manipulates your insulin. Is that accurate? And what are the consequences of those two things?
The gastric emptying thing can go both ways. Some people experience a slowdown. Some people actually experience a speeding up where they start getting diarrhea.
Okay.
What my guess is from this is that because of how it secretes insulin and it changes your blood, how your body is managing your glucose, is that you're actually starving off certain bacteria in the gut microbiome. And that's what's actually causing either the diarrhea or the transitory issues. Because I found that my patients that are more on the carb heavy side and they have the higher sugars and they have more of the, we'll call it a robust microbiome.
Yeah.
Versus my patients that are more low carb, keto, carnivore, they don't seem to get those side effects from it. They actually do fairly well. But that being said, there have been some studies done that actually show that it can change like neuronal development in the brain. So we can actually see positive changes in that. So I actually think that there is some chemistry changing there in a
positive way. Okay.
Yes.
And then because it's manipulating your insulin some, does that get dangerous if you ever stop?
A lot of the time, especially as people get older, you can actually get a deficiency in what's called the GLP-1, the glucagon-like peptide 1. And that's what we're augmenting with this. These are what these peptides are doing. So do I think that people will experience the change in their insulin once they stop? No, if they're healthy, if they're generally in good shape. Do I think that if somebody was on their way to pre-diabetes or they were diabetic or they already had insulin resistance issues, could those issues remain if they stop? Absolutely, right? But were they the right candidate in the first place? You can argue that, right? Because this medication was technically designed for diabetics to manage that insulin secretion and to increase that. So will they be fine with insulin secretion when they stop? Probably not, because that was the shape they were in the first place. For somebody who's relatively healthy, again, has all the stuff dialed in already, do I think you could start and stop? Absolutely. I've had patients that have stopped and they haven't had the rewakening, but they've kept the good habits.
Warning, I will say, I actually have some friends that I did not think were overweight that did this, not through you and not microdosing. And they were definitely ordering from, like, they would get it from a practitioner version and do it on their own. And I don't think they look so good right now. I'm just going to be real. Like, they did lose weight initially and then they gained it all back and now they're more miserable. So I've just seen a kind of a abuse of it with people and people I know, and it makes me sad to see. And I feel it's becoming a shortcut in a quick fix society and it's not being used right. That's just my opinion. I also will say that about a year and a half ago from this point, I weighed 20 pounds more than I do now. And I wasn't overweight. I feel like there's a lot of, like, nobody would have looked at me and said, you're overweight. I felt bigger for myself. But I would have said all the things, like, it's my hormones, it's my age, it's all these things. And my lab tests weren't anything crazy or extreme. There was nothing like that glaringly stood off. But my blood sugar started being a little different. And I was recommended from a Western medicine doctor first metformin, which I said no. And then somebody else offered semaglutide. And I said no to both of them. And I'm glad I did, because I ended up learning I had parasites, which took the first 10 pounds out right away. Then I thought I was great. And then I removed my silicone implants and I'm back to the weight I was pre any of this. So to me, I still think it's like a root thing. Like I'm assuming you take your patients through these questions. I'm not saying you specifically, but I think too many times, and I hope people listening really listen, like, if you try to do the quick fix for the wrong reasons without like really doing the work first, it can backfire big time. But if, like, you do go through all those other processes first and you've done the detoxes and you've done you're doing all those things first, then it would maybe make sense to me what you're saying about some kind of microdose with this. But when we try to do it and skip those steps, I see so many red flags there.
Exactly. And that it goes back to like my whole, my peptide, I guess, rule is that these are your cherry on top therapies. They are not necessarily your first line. Now, there are some that can be, I will call it like neutral as a first line, like the BPC 157. People can take that. It's like, you don't have to be really dialed in for much to start taking that one. We call it, the healing peptide, because it has multiple benefits to it. It's great for gut health. So people have IBS, IBD. If you have any joint issues or joint degeneration starting, it's great for that. And you can get it in an oral version. You can, and it's perfectly absorbed that way because it's actually something that's naturally made in the gut. So it can be absorbed through it as well. But that's one that, like, neutral to start here and there. We start really trying to manipulate other things in the body. And this is the part that I think, that I don't love about the research sites, is that there is an art to manipulating the physiology of a human being. and being able to understand the implications of how you can push different pathways up or downstream and being able to handle what comes out on the other end should be done by a provider that knows what they're doing.
I agree. Okay. And I can't stress this enough. I mean, I'm so flipping anti-insurance right now, medical insurance. I have so many reasons I don't like it. But I will start with when I worked in medical device sales, I really saw this in a bad way, that people let insurance dictate treatments. And it is so dangerous because, and I understand people think they're in a financial situation, so they've got to, or they maybe legitimately are in a financial situation, so they're letting insurance dictate treatment, but it comes back and bites us later because we're not doing our best options for ourselves. Insurance providers are not doctors. They are not caring doctors at all. They are a business and they are dictating things that could hurt our health later. So I'm a huge fan of naturopathic medicine. I love what you do. I highly advise people listening, do what you can to get in with either a functional medicine doctor that really has a holistic approach, or a naturopathic medicine doctor like Sabrina, because this is really, really important to understand root cause of things and use things smartly versus just going to pharmaceuticals and going off what insurance dictates for us.
Yeah, I could not agree more. You said that beautifully.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. Where should people find you? Where do you want them to go? You've got a great Instagram. Is there a specific site you want people learning more? Where do they best learn more about what you do? And how can they work with you?
Yeah, my Instagram is just at Dr. Solt. I'm by far the most active on that platform. My goal in 2024 is to be more active on others. But
SOLT, by the way, at Dr.
Yes.
Solt, SOLT, not not salt like we eat.
Yes. And then my clinical website is stemcelltherapypro.com. And that is the best way to inquire about becoming a patient, learn more about the different things that we offer. Again, we're open Monday through Thursday. You can get a hold of us from 9 to 5, so normal business hours.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.